Our first speaker is Ashley from Nashville, Tennessee. Her home group is the Friday Night Step 11 group, and she will be speaking on We Have Learned and Felt for 30 minutes. Ashley met her higher power in the ruins of her own plans and walked out rebuilt. Her experience reminds us that recovery is real and miracles still happen. Please welcome our friend Ashley.
I am your friend. Thank you for saying that. That feels really nice. Hi, everyone. I'm looking around and seeing lots of beautiful people, members of Alcoholics Anonymous, maybe some newcomers, some long-timers, some folks I've had the privilege and joy of knowing a long time. So good to be with you this Sunday afternoon. I am an alcoholic. My name is Ashley. And I do want to say a special welcome to anyone who's new or is hurting. Love you and glad you're here. My sobriety date is the 30th of December, 2006. And I have an Al-Anon birthday too, which was this week. So I'm 19 years in Alcoholics Anonymous and 20 in Al-Anon as of this week. Our sister program, co-founded by AA's co-founder's wife, Lois, has been important to me in integrating into my recovery, both as a problem drinker and someone adversely affected by the family disease of alcoholism. Thanks so much to the Deep Down Within group. You're such a dedicated group. I mean, just the communication, the earnestness, the sincerity. I really recognize and validate that. Thank you for your very good intentions and consistent practice of carrying the message as described in step 12. And hi, Arisa, my friend. Yeah, it's so good to see you. And it came to mind to share a little bit about how I met you. The first word of the first step is we. And that's been very important to me in my recovery. And I chose the so-called title for this talk, and of course, higher powers in charge, and I'll say whatever I end up saying with HP's guidance, as will Arisa and anyone who shares. But I chose a particular suggested title for this talk, and I'd like to do some readings from literature published by Alcoholics Anonymous, which includes these words, because I came in and I felt yucky, right? I just felt a lot of ouch. I hurt. I was lonely. I was scared, and words that's not in our published literature, but had a lot of what in outside language we would call complex trauma and deprivation and things like that. So I just hurt, I had a lot of ouch, and I feel better today and I feel differently today. And so when asked about a title for the talk, I had been in a meeting recently in Fairview, Tennessee, where I went for my 19th birthday. And it's so cool to go to that group and see people, with whom I came in. And I went to 9 meetings a week for the first several years, and a really sweet AA member, who was in the Sunday night women's literature study meeting I always went to. That's her home group. And that's where I wanted to be for my 19th anniversary. And we read this in that group. The distinguished American psychologist, William James, in his book, Varieties of Religious Experience, indicates a multitude of ways in which we have discovered God. We have no desire to convince anyone that there is only one way. It's such emphatic language, no desire to convince that there is only one way by which faith can be acquired. If we have learned and felt, and those are the words that really stood out to me, like, what have I learned and felt? Where am I 19 years into this experience? What have I learned and felt? What have I learned and how do I feel today? Means anything at all. It means that all of us, whatever our race, creed, or color, are children. And today higher power is my actual parent. That's really the language I use inside myself. Like, God is my actual parent. Are the children of a living creator with whom I may form a relationship. And I always think about the order of step 5, higher power, self, and others. And that is like the sequence of my life. It's how I organize my inner life, my inner intimacy, and how I hope I move out in the world into relationship with others, like higher power, self, others. I may form with a living creator with whom I may form a relationship upon simple and understandable terms. as soon as I am willing and honest enough to try. And then I was reading at the end of step 2 in this book where it says we felt new power flow in. I'm just going to look that up. I'm traveling as usual, so I'm using my electronic book. Yeah, so that, and then I want to read from the 12 and 12, the beginning of step 12, when it talks about what is a spiritual experience and how do I know if I have had one. Oh, it doesn't like numbers. It wants it to be spelled out. Okay. Yeah. Step 12 in the 12 and 12. Having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. The joy of living is the theme of AA's 12th step, and action is its key word. Here we experience the kind of giving that asks no rewards. Here we begin to practice all 12 steps of the program in our daily lives. I'm going to switch it to I because I always apply that more to you than myself when I say we. Here I begin to practice all 12 steps in my daily life so that I and those around me may find emotional sobriety. When the 12th step is seen in its full implication, it is really talking about the kind of love that has no price tag on it. And then skipping down to another paragraph, maybe there are as many definitions of spiritual awakening as there are people who have had them. But certainly, each genuine one has something in common with all the others. And the things they have in common are not too hard to understand. Again, it's emphasizing the simplicity, right? When a man or woman has had a spiritual awakening, the most important meaning of it is that they are now able to do, feel, there's our word, feel and believe, that which I could not do, feel, and believe previously on my unaided strength and resources alone. I have been granted a gift, which amounts to a new state of consciousness and being. And it reminds me, when I came in, the first person who sponsored me, Maureen, she suggested I read step 3 in the 12 and 12 a lot. She suggested I read it a lot. She suggested I read it twice a day, morning and night, in its entirety, every day for 30 days. And then if I skipped a reading, that maybe I consider starting my 30 days over again. So I was rereading step 3 today and thinking about her and honoring her. And it connects me to that idea of willingness, in that even surrendering invites me to make a decision and to make a choice to surrender. And when I surrender, it is, as Bill says, the proper use of my will. Like I can bring in my choice, my capacity to make a good decision, to act on my own behalf by choosing to invite this higher power into my life. And I've done that many times in many ways since I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. I think some of the first willingness and action and inviting a higher power in was just physically going to a lot of meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. I got sober in Franklin, Tennessee at the Monday through Friday nooner. And I just kept going back and back and back to that meeting. And I'm noticing some things coming in to my thinking that I'll go ahead and share. I didn't always feel good in that meeting. Like I listened for recovery. I listened when the literature was read. They read the big book on Wednesdays, the 12 and 12 on Thursdays. And, I recently saw someone who was very cruel to me from that group. She was a long timer. And of course, she was the first person on my 4th step for many years. And then she just wasn't. I didn't even notice. She just wasn't eventually. But I saw her for the first time in maybe 10 or 15 years recently. And I appreciated the opportunity to be direct and say, I hope I treat newcomers differently than you treated me. I did not always feel good in that meeting, but I always went. And it's how I started to learn about the 12 traditions because, there was a time after a meeting when she invited me to the parking lot. And of course, I'm vulnerable. I'm new. I'm looking up to her. She's got more time. She shares a lot. She seems to sponsor a lot of people. And she sat me on the front hood of a car and told me I was bad for Alcoholics Anonymous and never to come back. And I was practicing the custom of that group, which is if there's a newcomer in the room, to get a big book of Alcoholics Anonymous and write my name and my phone number in it and pass the book around to the, male identifying people or the female identifying people for the newcomer. And I was there for quite a while before I realized that the women in the group hadn't done that for me. And it was this old fart, and we all call him Old Fart Morgan, who has since gone to the big meeting of this guy who taught me the third tradition. And what I felt was determination, anger, pain, and the resolve was, you cannot keep me out. I need and want this thing so much. Like, I know that it has worked for other people, and I believe it will work for me. And I staked everything on that third tradition, that the only requirement for membership was a desire to stop drinking. And that's been my experience. I have come across people in AA who had what I wanted, and I've come across people who were like, oh my word, God save me from that behavior. Please don't let me be so hurtful to another person. And that's part of the joy of the theme of living, right? Is that we're all grouped up together, and we do have these principles of the 12 traditions and the 12 concepts of service that give me this safe container in which to practice learning and feeling and being in relationship and growing. And so it's interesting that I felt so bad when I got here that I let the small feeling bad in a meeting not override my desire to feel better overall in my life. And I'm so grateful that I persisted past that hurdle, because today the way I feel is safe. I feel grounded. I feel a lot of joy. And to me, joy is different from happiness. Happiness is lovely. But as a friend says, joy is happiness with backbone. It's this sense that I really am okay. And actually, I always have been okay. Like, things maybe didn't work particularly well. And I was clumsy, and there were a lot of skills that I didn't have and that I just wasn't taught, and one of the things I realized in recent years is I couldn't teach myself what I didn't know, and I couldn't teach myself what I didn't know how to learn, but by coming to Alcoholics Anonymous and reading the literature that's published here, talking with people who have been working a good program, by, as it says in the preface of the 12 and 12, embracing these principles, which if practiced as a way of life, enable me to expel the obsession to drink and become usefully and happily whole. I have changed a lot, and at first I didn't know I was changing. My first Al-Anon sponsor, she lives in a different state. And so I'd see her periodically, and she would get this like quizzical look, and she was like, you have changed so much. I'd be like, really? Was I an asshole? I've changed so much. And I have changed so much, What got me into the rooms was someone in my family got some professional help. She was the first person in our family to do that in a way that was meaningful and truly could make a difference in her life. And the folks who were provisioning her professional help did an intervention on me. They said no one thinks to do an intervention on the lost child, which was kind of the role I had been assigned and played in the family. And the feelings that went with that were hopelessness, despair. It was the language from the big book would be pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization, tortured by loneliness, as Bill says in the 12 and 12. And I ended up staying at this place for 42 days of inpatient treatment and starting to work the 12 steps. And when I started to really feel my feelings in that context, it was rage. It was rage. And I don't mean any other word. I mean rage. Big, bombastic, frothing at the mouth, pink, red-faced rage. And it was well earned and it was hard earned. And I came by it honestly. And the sense of injustice, and I can feel my tears coming, like the sense of injustice with which I lived based on, the experiences of what adults did and did not do growing up. And then my own coping mechanisms, which in AA, we would talk about my defects of character or survival strategies or ineffective behaviors that outlived their usefulness, was so big. And today, what anger looks like in my life is it's just this source of moral information, right? It's like if I get angry about something, it's like something's inconsistent with my values. Something seems to give me information that maybe my boundary has been violated, or if I see anger, irritation in someone, I can do a spot check inventory like Bill talks about so usefully in step 10 and the 12. And so, did I step on someone else's toes? How am I behaving or thinking in a way that's inconsistent with my integrity and my values? And what is their anger letting me know about how I can have this invitation to check in with my higher power, which is love, source, stability, and come back into right relationship with another human being? And another feeling I have a lot today is laughter and the joy of laughter. And I get the giggles. I got the giggles in a meeting recently and excused myself and went to another room and just giggled. I mean, I get the giggles and I love to laugh. And I always did like to laugh. I like to play and have fun. And today there is a real emancipation from, that wonderful language, I guess it's in A Vision for You, where it says, we are not a glum lot, and life is not to be experienced as a vale of tears. And I was serious and in pain, for valid reasons previously. And so the working of the steps, which has helped unburden and unearth and then, air out and then integrate all of this stuff, has allowed me just to feel the joy of so much laughter, and I remember, since it's my 20 in Al-Anon, I was remembering where I picked up my 10-year AA medallion in India. And I've been to meetings in 10 countries around the world. And I'm grateful to our General Service Office and our service structure that helps make that possible. But what I would listen for when I would show up at a place that was new to me when I was trying to find an AA meeting was the laughter. And now I have my own laughter. My partner and I were falling asleep last night and I was pestering him a little bit. I was like, what are you doing? And he was pestering and we got the giggles. It's so fun. It's so fun to laugh. And I've also been having these experiences recently where I'm just by myself and I start laughing. It's like a neurobiological state or something, just this joyful laughter, and I didn't have much to laugh about when I got here. So that's something I feel that I really enjoy. And I guess the learning that goes with that is, it's a long walk, right? It's a long story. My litter mate, as I call her, in recovery is in the dark night of the soul right now. And the compassion I feel and the empathy I feel, like I can feel the tears coming, and it helps me remember what I have learned and what I felt in my dark nights of the soul, even in recovery. And the way, whether it was, my old farmhouse in Tennessee and lying in the bed and learning to hold my own hand, or to comfort and self-soothe myself, or to go to the language in the stories in the back of the big book and read about how other members had their own spiritual experiences and found a God of their understanding. Those are happy ending stories. They all stay sober and they have a spiritual experience. And I would often read those stories at night when I was, in the pain, and, different places in the world where I have felt grief. And it's so wonderful. I kind of feel like I'm keeping a fire while she's in the cave doing the deep soul work, and I'm just the fire keeper. And it's so wonderful to have learned this too shall pass. This too shall pass. And I've been remembering some of the foundational things that I heard as a newcomer, like, when a door closed, a window opens, but hell is in the hallway. And it's hard to be in the hallway, you know, but I've learned it passes, it passes, and I can pretend to care, but I can't to show up. And that was about me. Like I couldn't pretend to care for myself, and I could show up for myself. And just by working the steps and having a sponsor and reading the literature again and going to international conventions in Atlanta and Vancouver and doing some service, it's allowed me to feel differently because of what I've learned here. And that brings me to when my partner and I moved to Cambridge, Massachusetts in 2019. I was going to meetings in what some members of AA call the Republic of Cambridge. I was like, my cup wasn't being filled there, and I didn't really know what to do about that. And I was like, oh, the first word of the first step. And I remembered a member from Nashville who was in that home group where I got sober, who travels a lot and speaks a lot. And so I just called him and I was like, do you know any sober members of AA in the Boston area? And he asked permission to exchange my phone number with Arisa as our second speaker. And I went to the Wednesday night meeting that Arisa attends, and on the sidewalk outside the meeting, I asked her to sponsor me. And it's beautiful. I felt comforted. I felt seen. I felt recognized. I felt witnessed. I felt validated, and every time we spoke, or I went to her house, or I didn't go to the meeting because it was too late at night for me and I go to bed early, or she would send me step work and I remember, just really it's like I could borrow the wisdom or borrow the experience, strength and hope, borrow the sense of, it'll be okay. It'll be okay. And I remember in particular, after this accident I had in which I nearly died and nearly hemorrhaged to death and all kinds of really ouchy things, I gained a lot of weight. And I was talking with Arisa about that and just the intimacy and the humor and the safety of saying, like in step 2, if I have to wear a muumuu the rest of my life, let me be okay with a muumuu the rest of my life. It's just so good to be real. And that's another way. And that's not necessarily a feeling. It's a state of being, but the authenticity of being a member of Alcoholics Anonymous and being undefended and being candid is so precious to me. Like, I don't feel suspicious. I don't feel skeptical. I don't feel the need to conceal or disguise myself. It's really good to learn that because of my relationship with my higher power, I am secure. And that's a huge part of my recovery today is inner safety and inner trust and the inner capacity and inner resource. Yeah. I mean, that's a nice way to live, right? To have inner safety and inner trust. Let me ask HP what's next. I think the simplicity, like the keep it simple of Alcoholics Anonymous is something else that I'm really enjoying feeling and learning. Like the world can be complicated, circumstances can be complicated, administration, bureaucratic things can be complicated. It can seem like people are complicated, but that inner simplicity of it's really okay right here, right now, and I'm okay. And that's a really nice way to feel. That's a really nice way to feel. I have a lot of time left, but I don't really know that I have that much more to offer today. Maybe I'll say something about, I know what I can offer. So I'm doing a job at the moment, which is a job in which I haven't participated in some years. And stepping back into this particular kind of work at this stage of my recovery, particularly when my previously frozen and buried feelings from childhood have been surfacing, was a really big experience in my recovery. I arrived at this place, I'm in Georgia in America, to work, and I had the capacity to witness and notice that the present day, what I call now time, was reminding my young inner professional, the me of my 20s and 30s, of feelings that it hadn't been safe enough to feel in the past. And I think this is a part of the emotional sobriety that Bill talks about, like having access to my full humanity in now time and memory time. and I'm thinking about how in working the steps, it was just, the parents, those relationships, the people from college, and I'm referring in my imagination, and I should say that out loud, to step 8 and making a list of all persons I had harmed and becoming willing to make amends to them all. And then taking the action in step 9, making amends to my beloved mother, and having a beautiful relationship with her until she died, making amends to all the folks along the way. And that's not ever excusing neglect and abandonment and male sexual violence and trauma, never excusing it, never condoning it, but doing what I can do today to be free and to have that inner safety and inner trust and inner resource and inner capacity to giggle whenever I feel, to giggle, to let the past be the past and do what I can today. And any of you who've been at other meetings with me know that I would often open my share with the passage from the Family Afterward that states, "The dark past in God's hands is the greatest asset I have." And Maureen would always say, prayer heals pain. Pain is the touchstone of all spiritual growth. And sometimes I don't want any spiritual growth. Thank you. I just want to have like a hot dog and have some fun. And I'm glad that today I'm at the place where I can have hot dogs and have fun. But those were the relationships with which I started. And now it's like these younger versions of me are doing their healing. And so when I arrived at this job, I had some nights where I slept 2 hours a night. And I was feeling the feelings from my 20s and 30s when I did not have a mentor. I was not in recovery. I didn't have a sponsor. I didn't have an older woman guiding me through, as most industries are, a business that was fraught with, the ick. And it was hard, and then I would go work at 12 to 14. I'm not valorizing myself. Lots of people work lots of hard jobs, but for me, it was 14-hour days outside and like 18 and 24-degree weather on 2 hours of sleep for several days in a row. And these feelings unbatched over time is something from now time would remind my young inner professional of those days from my 20s. I just read my literature, got on my knees in the morning, got on my knees at bedtime. And because I have this anchored sense of self today and that order of the 5th step with God, self, and others, I could be present to the past doing its growth and its healing, coming into the sunlight of the spirit. And I had lots of, sober women, recovering women. And I picked one to sort of witness me over these 2 weeks for the consistency and stability, because that was so much of the ouch from which I came, right? Not having consistency and stability and safety. And now I'm having a really beautiful time at work, and an expression that came to mind. I was, in the industry I was at those ages was so unsafe. And a friend reminded me that in her experience in that industry, there were a couple older people who were the magic, who were really safe. And what's neat is that in practicing the 12 steps today, I get to be that magic in this workplace. I'm the magic for the youngsters. I've been mentoring an 18-year-old on my job, and just modeling what it means to be a grounded person with awareness, and there's some things that will happen at work that include some social risk, and we're like replicating it, but we have to actually do it in order to show it. And so I'm always languaging what it means, kind of like in the circle of an AA meeting, to hear about violence without enacting violence, like to tell the story without the story becoming a new chapter of harm, and to have that capacity and that bandwidth to be grounded with higher power and the spiritual principles, including the traditions and the concepts of service, and hold that space while people can heal if they choose to. And it reminds me, in concept 4, that the minority voice always has a right to petition and appeal and be heard. And I create that in my workplace. There's something that's going to happen, and I'm going to close up in a minute. And I said, everyone gets a safety word, and your safety word means stop. No matter who you are, how old you are, how much power you do or do not have on this project, stop means stop. And I certainly didn't have that kind of awareness about myself. I hurt myself. I hurt others. It was unintentional. But to have skills and tools and language and
principles and concepts and a higher power where I'm safe for myself and I can be safe for others feels really, really good. And I'm glad that I've learned that here in Alcoholics Anonymous. So I love you. Thanks for the chance to visit with you today. Peace be with you. And I'm very grateful I get to hear my friend Arisa share.